tonight, oh, Gary, I apologize here. Gary Poholek.
Poholek.
Poholek. Easy for me to say. Gary Poholek. That's what he calls his fans, Poholiks. So actor Gary Poholek will perform his one-man show, Charles Dickens and a Christmas Carol. That's right, we're celebrating Christmas in July. Yep. In the show tonight, Gary, as Charles Dickens, acts out Dickens' beloved Christmas story, just as the author himself often did while on tour. The result is a one-man show with more than 40 characters and one heartwarming theatrical event. Come celebrate Christmas in July as the spirits of Christmas past, present, and future come to life in a special performance you'll never forget. All 75 of us or so, let's give a big round of applause.
What doth it profit a man to gain a fortune and lose his soul? I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall not put my readers out of humor with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. Their faithful friend and servant, C.D. December 1843. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, Stave 1, Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. And Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. Well, I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. Oh, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hands shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Oh, come now. We can do better than that. Marley was as dead as a doornail. It's too late now. We've missed the moment. Scrooge knew Marley was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Why, Scrooge and Marley were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, and his sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of Marley's funeral, and solemnized it with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. And this must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. Now, Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. Well, the firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Now, sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. Well, it was all the same to him. But he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out a generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars dared implore him to bestow a trifle, and no children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all of his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Now, once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house, and it was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighbouring offices. The door of Scrooge's office was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Now Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he dare not replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part company, wherefore the clerk put on his comforter and tried to warm himself at his candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, and he had come upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation Scrooge had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug! Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I am sure."
"I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry, What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then, Uncle. What right have you to be dismal? And what reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Bah! Humbug!
Don't be cross, Uncle.
What else can I be, when I live in a world of fools such as this? Merry Christmas. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you? But a time for paying bills without any money, a time for finding yourself a year older and not a shilling richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in them presented dead against you. If I could work my will, nephew, every idiot who goes about with a Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own plum pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. Uncle, nephew, you keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it? But, Uncle, you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you.
Well, there are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say. Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time when it has come round, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to Christmas can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. It's the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their hearts freely, to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in me pocket, I believe Christmas has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it! The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. But becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked at his fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. Sorry, sir. I'm begging your pardon, Mr. Scrooge.
Yes, let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. And you, nephew, you're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament.
Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come and dine with us tomorrow. Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed, he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity first. I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humour to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon.
Scrooge's nephew left the room without an angry word. Notwithstanding, he stopped at the door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, Bob Cratchit, who, as cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. Now, Bob Cratchit, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let another gentleman in. He was a portly gentleman, pleasant to behold, and he now stood with his hat off in Scrooge's office. Oh, yes, Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing a Mr. Scrooge or a Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
Sorry, sir. Quite so, yes. No doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner.
Liberality?
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute. They suffer greatly at the present time, sir. Many thousands are in want of common comforts, Hundreds of thousands are in want of common necessaries, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Oh, yes, sir. Plenty of prisons.
And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?
Well, they are still. I wish I could say they were not.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund, sir, to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time above all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
Nothing. You wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, sir, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas. I can't afford to make idle people merry. I support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, Mr. Scrooge, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they'd better do it and decrease the surplus population. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue his point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labours with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. And it was foggier yet, and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold outside. The owner of one scant young nose that was gnawed by the cold, as a bone is gnawed by a dog, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol, but at the first sound of "God bless you, my regent, to me mine, nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the young boy fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting-house arrived, and with an ill will, Scrooge admitted the fact to his clerk, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose?
Oh, if it's quite convenient, sir.
It is not convenient, sir, and it is not fair. If I was to stop a half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work?
I suppose it's because of the custom, sir. It's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge.
It's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge. It's a poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Scrooge.
Yes, that's my weakness. I'm a martyr to my own generosity. Very well, be off with you, and be here all the earlier next morning.
The clerk promised that he would, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt.
There's another fellow. My clerk, Bob Cratchit, with 15 10 shillings a week, and a wife and family, and talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam.
Scrooge walked out with a growl.
Hey, poppycock. Balding hazard. Mind your business now. Here, what are you staring at? Out of my chair. That's my usual chair. Go on now. I've already audacious. Go on now. Oh, you can stand over there for a moment.
He took his usual melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, he went home to bed.
Well, go on, you can have the chair back. Well, don't waste it. You paid good money for it, didn't you? How much did you pay for it? It was free? There's nothing that's free. Nothing that's free. I'll send you a bill next week. Here.
Now Scrooge lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley, and the yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also, that old Scrooge had about as little of what we would call fancy about him as any man in the city of London. And then, let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker not a knocker, but Marley's face. It had a dismal light about it, a dismal light, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. Does that make sense? I've never understood that part. Anyone understand that part? A bad lobster in a dark cellar. All right, I've been performing this for like 20 years, and I've never understood that part, but it's in the book. It's on chapter 1, or I should say stave 1, chapter 13, page 13 rather, about halfway down. A bad lobster in a dark cellar. It must be some Victorian reference. It looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. Scrooge. Marley? As Scrooge stared fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. Now, to say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key and turned it sturdily, and walked in, and lighted his candle. It was dark, very dark. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well. So you may suppose that it was pretty dark. Up Scrooge went not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked about his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Yes. Nobody under the table. Nobody under the sofa. Nobody under the bed. Nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Thus, secured against surprise, and quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom, and sat down before the fire. As Scrooge threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a disused bell, which hung in the room for some purpose now forgotten. It was with great astonishment that as he looked, he saw the bell begin to swing, and soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. But the bells ceased as they had begun. Together, they were succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain in the cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, and then coming up the stairs, and then coming straight towards his door without a pause. It came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Marley's ghost. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes and keys and padlocks wrought in heavy steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. "How now?" said Scrooge. "What do you want with me?" "Much," replied the ghost. "Who are you?" "Asked me who I was." "Well, you're particular for a ghost." "Who were you then?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." "You don't believe in me, do you?" No, I don't." "Why do you doubt your own senses?" Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be nothing more than an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whoever you are. Mercy, dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do Do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do you come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness.
But you are chained, Jacob. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life, Ebenezer. Yet I made it myself, link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong chain you bear yourself? It was full, as heavy, and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain, oh, captive, bound and double-ironed. Not to know, no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunities misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I.
Yeah, but you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business.
Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, the third on the next upon the last stroke of 12. Look to see me no more, Ebenezer, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the apparition walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, and when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. Marley's ghost held up its hand and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable, and being, from the emotions he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, of course, and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He remembered on a sudden that Marley's ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, and Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair was white, as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and it held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand.
Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Oh, long past?
No, your past. The things you shall see with me are but shadows of the things that have been. They will have no consciousness of us.
What business brings you here?
Your welfare.
To be woken by a ghost at 1 o'clock in the morning is hardly conducive to my welfare.
Oh, your reclamation then. Arise and walk with me. Scrooge rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, he clasped its robe in supplication. Oh, I am a mortal. I am liable to fall. Bear but a touch of my hand here, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand, and the city had entirely vanished. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter's day with snow upon the ground. Oh, good heavens, said Scrooge. I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. You recollect the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfolded.
Strange to have forgotten it for so many years. Let us go on. They walked along the road until a little market town appeared in the distance with its bridge, its church, its winding river, and its school. The school is not quite deserted, is it? A solitary boy, neglected by his friends, is left there still. Upon entering the dreary school hall, they found a lonely boy reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge wept to see his poor forgotten self as he had used to be.
The poor boy. I wish I... Oh, but it's too late now.
What is the matter? Asked the ghost.
Nothing. It's nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
The ghost smiled thoughtfully. Let us see another Christmas. Just then, the doors to the old schoolhouse swung open, and a little girl, much smaller than the boy Ebenezer, came darting in, clapping her hands together with delight.
Why, it's Fan! Oh, bless her heart! It's my sister, my little sister Fan! Fan! Hello, Fan!
These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us. The little girl darted up to the boy. Ebenezer, I've come to bring you home. Home for good and all. Home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. He spoke so gently to me one night that I wasn't afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and sent me in a coach to bring you. We're to be together all the Christmas time long and have the merriest time in all the world. Always a delicate creature, said the ghost of Christmas past. Always a delicate creature whom a breath might have withered. But she had a large heart.
That she had, I'll not deny it, spirit, God forbid.
She died a young woman, and had, I believe, children.
One child.
Oh, yes, one child. Your nephew.
Yes. Yes, my nephew.
My time grows short. Quick, let us see another Christmas. Again Scrooge saw himself a little older now, a young man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl, in whose eyes there were tears. It matters little, to you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? A golden one. What then? This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which is so hard as poverty, and nothing it condemns with such severity as the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off, one by one, until only the master passion, gain, engrosses you. What then? Well, if I've grown so much the wiser, what then? I'm not changed towards you, am I? Our contract to marry is an old one, Ebenezer, made when we were both poor and content to be so. But if you were free today, or tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You who weigh everything by gain, or choosing her? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do. And I release you. Have I ever sought release? In words, no. In a changed nature, yes. In everything that made my love of value to you, yes. Tell me, If this had never been between us, would you seek me out and try to win me now? What? You think not? I think not. And so, I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. May you be happy in the life you have chosen, Belle.
Belle? Go after her, you fool! Go after her! You fool! You fool. Spirit, show me no more. Remove me from this place. These are but shadows of the things that have been. That they are what they are, do not blame me. Remove me. I cannot bear it.
Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, left the office behind them, why, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city, and it was made plain enough by the dressings of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up, and the ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Fezziwigs! Know it! I was apprenticed here.
They went in, and at sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, Scrooge cried in great excitement,
Why, it's Fezziwig! It's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart! It's Fezziwig alive again!
Yo-ho, my boys! Yo-ho there! Ebenezer! Dick! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly into the warehouse, accompanied by his fellow apprentice, Dick Wilkins. Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight! Hilly-hi-ho! It's Christmas Eve, Dick! It's Christmas, Ebenezer! Clear away, my lads! Clear away before you can say Jack Robinson! Clear away! And let's have lots of room here! Yes! Clear away! There was nothing those two boys wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floors were swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came the three young Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable, and in came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. There were dances, there were forfeits, there were more dances, there was cake, there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies, and plenty of beer. And this is the part of the story the narrator likes best. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? When it's not real beer. Well, you wouldn't know, would you? It might be. All right. But the great effect of the evening came when old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig! Why, you couldn't have predicted at any given time what was to become of the most. And when the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Oh, and Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig, why, they took their stations, one at either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. A small matter, said the ghost of Christmas past. A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. Small? Why, is it not? Old Fezziwig has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? You don't understand, Spirit. Old Fezziwig, he had the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our work light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. The happiness he gave us is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. What is the matter? Nothing in particular. Something, I think. No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my own clerk just now. Spirit, show me no more. Remove me from this place. Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Waking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. His room had undergone a surprising transformation, for the walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked a perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened, and heaped upon the floor to form a kind of a throne were turkeys, geese, game, mince pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there stood a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike Plenty's horn. It was clothed in a simple green robe, bordered with white fur, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You've never seen the like of me before, have you?
Oh, no, I am afraid I have not.
You've never walked forth with any of my brothers.
How many brothers have you had, Spirit?
Oh, more than 1,800.
Oh, a tremendous family to provide for. Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night and I learnt a lesson, which is working now. Tonight If you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it.
Touch my robe! Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, pies, pudding, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. And perhaps it was his sympathy with all poor men that led the good spirit straight to Scrooge's clerks, for there he went and took Scrooge with him, and on the threshold of the door the good spirit stopped and smiled and blessed Bob Cratchit's dwelling with a sprinkling from his torch.
Is there a peculiar flavour that you sprinkle from your torch?
There is my own.
Would it apply to any kind of a dinner on a day like today?
Well, to any. A poor one most.
Why a poor one most?
Because it needs it most. They went in, and then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence. I wonder what has ever got your precious father then, and your brother Tiny Tim.
There's father coming!
Cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. And in came little Bob and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim. He bore a little crutch, and he had his limbs supported by an iron frame. And bless my heart alive, my dear, how late you are, and how did little Tim behave? As good as gold and better, mother. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and he thinks the strangest things. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in church because he was a cripple, and that it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who it was that made lame beggars walk and blind men see. I think he grows strong and hearty. I do. The two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once, why, they went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. And such a bustle ensued, why, you might have thought a goose, the rarest of all birds. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy hissing hot, and Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigour. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. Oh, and those two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once, why, they set chairs for everybody, oh, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts. The two young Cratchits crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last, the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. But when she did, and when the first gush of stuffing issued forth, such a murmur of delight arose all round the table. Ah. All right. Right. I'm taking me goose over here. Right. All right. Such a murmur of delight arose around the table. Ah. You can't have any goose. All right. Oh, now it's Christmas. Wait a minute. All right. Such a murmur of delight arose all round the table. There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavour, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration, eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes. It was a sufficient dinner for such a large family. At last, the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. And then all the Cratchit family drew round, and Bob proposed, "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of our feast." "The founder of the feast, indeed," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Why, I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I hope he'd have a good appetite for it." "My dear, the children, it's Christmas Day." "It should be Christmas Day, Bob. It should be, on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge. You know he is, Bob. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow." "My dear, it's Christmas Day." "Very well, I'll drink his health. For your sake and the day's, not for his. Long life to him. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year." Well, he'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. Well then, a Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. May God bless us. God bless us, every one, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. "Spirit," asked Scrooge, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat by the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here." "Oh, no. No, Spirit. No." "If these shadows remain unaltered, the child will die." "No, Spirit. No. No, say he will be spared." "What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Man, if man you be in heart, forbear that wicked cant until you have discovered what the surplus is, and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child." "No, Spirit. Has he no refuge? Has he no resource? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near." The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and saw it not. Upon the last stroke of 12, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and, lifting up his eyes, he beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. "I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened but will happen in the time before us. Is that so, Spirit? Ghost of the future,
I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear your company. Will you not speak to me?"
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
"The night is waning fast, and I know it is precious time to me. Lead on, spirit, lead on."
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, but there they were, in the heart of it, at the exchange, amongst the merchants. The spirit stopped beside two businessmen, and Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
"Sir, old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?"
"I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead."
"Well, when did he die? I thought he'd never die."
"Well, last night, I believe."
"Well, why, what was the matter with him?"
"Oh, God knows. I don't."
"Well, what has he done with all of his money?"
"Well, I'm sure I don't know. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know."
"Well, it's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my word, I don't know of anybody would go to it."
Scrooge looked towards the phantom for an answer. It gave him none. The hand was pointed straight before them. They went into an obscure part of town, where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop, and sitting in among the wares he dealt in was a grey-haired rascal nearly 70 years of age. It was old Joe, the pawnbroker. Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. 'Twas Mrs. Dilber, Scrooge's housekeeper.
"Hey, come into the parlour. Come into the parlour."
The woman threw her bundle on the floor and sat down on a stool.
"What odds?" "Oh, Joe. Oh, very well then. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose."
No, indeed.
"If he had wanted to keep these things after he was dead, the wicked old screw, why wasn't he more natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had someone to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying there, grasping out his last, alone, by himself."
It's a judgment on him.
"I wish it was a little heavier judgment. And it would have been, you may depend upon it, if I had been able to get my hands on anything else." "Oh, open the bundle, Joe, and let me know the value of it. Open the bundle, Joe."
Here. What do you call this? His bed curtains?
"I? His bed curtains?"
You don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there?
"Yes, I do. Why not?"
You were born to make your fortune, and you'll certainly do it.
"Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. No man more so." "Oh, Oh, mind you don't drop oil upon them blankets.
His blankets?
Who else's do you think? He ain't likely to take cold without 'em. Not where he's going.
Oh, I hope he didn't die of anything catching.
Don't you worry about that. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him if he did. Oh, Joe, oh, you may look through that shirt until your eyes ache. You won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place neither. It's the best he had, and it's a fine one too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What do you call wasting of it?
Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure. Calico's good enough for him. His nephew was fool enough to do it, but I took it off him again.
Spirit, said Scrooge, is there no one in this city who shows remorse for this man's death? Spirit, I beg you, show me some tenderness connected with a death. The ghost of Christmas yet to come conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and they entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated around the fire. But this time it was quiet, all quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues.
I wonder what has ever got your precious father then. It must be near his time. Or past it rather. But I think he walks a little slower than he used these last few evenings. I have known him walk. I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. Oh, but he was light to carry. And your father loved him so. It was no trouble. No trouble. And there's your father at the door.
And little Bob, in his comforter, he had need of it, poor fellow, came in.
Oh, bless your heart alive, my dear. How late you are. You went today then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I went today. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised Tiny Tim we would walk there every Sunday. Oh, my little child. My little child. I met Mr. Scrooge's nephew today in the street, and he said I looked just a little down, you know. So I told him, I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said. Heartily sorry, and for your good wife. If I can be of service in any way, here's my card, he said. That's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, it wasn't for the thought of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as his kind way. that was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. But however and whenever it is that we part from one another, I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim. Shall we, my dears? Or this first parting that there was among us. And I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient, how mild he was, although he was a little child, that we shall not quarrel among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. I'm very happy, my dears. I'm very happy. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God.
Ghost of the future, let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him as before until they reached an iron gate, a churchyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name. Ebenezer. No! Hear me! No! Spirit! I am not the man I was. I will not be that man again. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Spirit, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes. And the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own, best and happiest of all. The time before him was his own to make amends in. Oh, Jacob Marley! Jacob Marley, wherever you are! Oh, Jacob! Jacob Marley! Heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this! I say it on my knees, old Jacob! On my knees! I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. Oh, a Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Running towards the window, he opened it and put out his head. Hello, my fine fellow! What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes. Aye? What's today, my fine fellow? Today? Why, it's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. Oh, the spirits have done it all in one night. Or they can do whatever they like. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow! Hello? Do you know the poultry shop in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
What an intelligent boy. Yes, what a remarkable boy. Yes, do you know whether they've sold that prize turkey that was hanging in the window? Not the little one, the big one.
What, the one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck.
It's hanging up in the window now.
Is it? You go and buy it.
What?
Walker! No. I am in earnest. You go and buy it. And tell the man to bring it here that I may give him the directions where to take it. Now, you come back in 5 minutes and I'll give you a shilling. And you come back in less than 5 and I'll give you a half a crown. Run, boy! The prize turkey. Oh, I shall send it to Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. He got himself dressed all in his best and at last got out into the streets. Yes. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Glad tidings to you. Yes. Merry Christmas. Season's greetings. Yes. Hello. Good morning. Ebenezer Scrooge went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro. And he had never dreamed that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house, and he passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, and he made a dash and did it. Fred, it is I, your old Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred? Let him in! Let him in! It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office. Next morning, old Ebenezer Scrooge, oh, he was early there. You see, if he could only get there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, well, that was the thing he had set his heart upon, and he did it. Yes, he did, for the clock struck 9. No Bob. Quarter past. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too, and he was on the stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. Morning, sir. Hello. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day? Sorry, sir. Yes, I am behind me time, sir. Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please. Oh, it's only once a year, sir. You see, I was making rather merry yesterday, Mr. Scrooge. Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I'm about to raise your salary. I'll raise your salary. Are you feeling all right, Mr. Scrooge? Yes, Bob. Merry Christmas, Bob! Merry Christmas! A Merrier Christmas, Bob Cratchit, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. Yes, I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a cup of Christmas cheer. So make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the good old city knew. And some people laughed to see the change in him, but he little heeded them. His own heart laughed, and that was enough for him. And it was always said of Scrooge that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one. Thank you.